Dark Souls 3 is a game that you should not play on PC, as well as the only Dark Souls game in which your health bar is as big as a Mario game, meaning basically non-existent. In this game, you explore the Dying Land for the 5th time in a row, and trust me, the count won't be stopped anytime soon. Apparently, the Souls games are connected, and apparently that's a bad thing. So you're set on a quest to kill all the Lords of Cinder and become the biggest Cinder block there is. But before all that, the best place to start is in the beginning, with a character creator that somehow looks only slightly better than the character creator of a game released in the PS3. So after making the most handsome face in the 21st century, I'm finally ready to set out on the quest, and I gotta say, this game looks pretty damn good. Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 1 were not the next coming of Christ when it came to the graphical power of the game, but they managed to make up for it with the stunning, memorable areas that made an impact and managed to tell a story with no words. Dark Souls 3, on the other hand, is a beautiful world, both in the stylistic and in the graphical sense. Out of all the games, Dark Souls 3 is the one that drives the point of the dying world the most, and I feel like it shows the world perfectly. This is a world that has decayed. It's collapsing on itself basically, and the world is grey, it lacks any color at all, as though the life, the soul of the world, abandoned it, leaving a husk of its former self. The story of Dark Souls 3 is all about the cycle of the Age of Fire and ending or extending the cycle. You fight all the Lords of Cinder that fought to keep the fire lit, and now it's your turn to make the decision of extending the Age of Fire or bring forth a new age. The world is in the worst state that it's ever been, with many locations and enemies that come back in this game, but they are nowhere near the glory days of Dark Souls 1 and 2. And mind you, those worlds were already in pretty bad shape. I think one of the best moments in the entire journey was when I made my way to the Dark Souls 3 version of Anor Londo, a place that in the last game was a vast capital with the fake sun illuminating it. Now it's nothing but the main castle, rid of all the color and life, in the middle of a frozen wasteland. You find references to other characters like Sif, Astoria, and even some characters from Dark Souls 2. There are paintings of some characters from Souls 1 in the castles right before Anor Londo. You obtain the Moonlight Greatsword that you got from defeating Seath the Scaleless in Souls 1, and the tutorial boss in Souls 1 is chilling in the world and you can even remove its legs. Oh. Hell, if I remember correctly, they just bring back the Painted World DLC from Souls 1 as DLC in Souls 3. In the other games, I never really got the idea that the worlds were really connected, and I never really thought that was a bad thing, as the worlds were complete enough on their own. But I really do appreciate the lengths that they went to establish that these worlds are connected. This feels like a world that has been through a lot, a world that is just tired and ready to move on, and because of that, I really like the colors that Dark Souls 3 uses. Or, I guess, the lack of them. I think a lot of people dislike the lack of color in Souls 3, at least that's what I've been able to gather. But I feel like this is the most fitting color scheme they could have gone for, and I think that it has the best color scheme of the Souls trilogy. Fuck! Dark Souls 3 controls basically the same as Dark Souls 1 and 2, with a bit more polish and refinement to avoid the many issues of Souls 1 and avoid all of Souls 2 from happening. The durability system was more similar to what it was in Dark Souls 2, and as I said when talking about 2, I don't think that the durability system should be there if it wasn't gonna add anything to the game other than being something that you occasionally have to consider when the stars align and you perform 2,000 laps around Peach's castle. But I mean, I guess it's fine. It doesn't really affect the game, so I don't really care. It's just that if you're gonna have it there and then it ain't gonna do anything, don't have it there. This time around, I decided to go for a magic build, as all the other times I was simply going with the option that required the least amount of brain cells to think about. My endgame weapon was the Moonlight Greatsword. One of the best aspects about Souls 3 is simply the amount of quantity of weapons and options that the game has. With the magical weapons alone, I could choose between like 3 different staffs I found, many different magically oriented weapons, many other weapons that can be infused with certain items which will make the weapon skill to magic. I mean, the variety of what you can do with just one class and build is possibly the biggest strength of Dark Souls 3, and is probably the reason I will want to go back to the game long after I finish it. One of the most controversial aspects about 3, however, is the level design, and to describe the common complaints, I have pulled this clip from the one time that I talk about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. After the first game, every game that followed it will be considerably more linear when compared to the expanding world of Dark Souls 1, as in the case of Dark Souls 2, in which many of the main areas connected only to the main area that preceded it, and more times than not, the area that was succeeded, occasionally with some other side areas to explore. The levels had less winding paths, and rarely would you find shortcuts and alternating paths leading to other areas. If there was a level that came after Majula, chances are there will be no other areas connecting to it except for Majula and whatever came after it. More than it being a matter of one method being superior or inferior, it's more so a matter of preference. Would you rather have a really big world to explore or a more streamlined world? Both still have a bajillion areas and things to see in them, but the way in which they are shown is where the preferences lie. Personally, I am more of a big fan of the more open labyrinth approach of Souls 1. Feels more like a Metroidvania, and I love those games, but I would be lying if I said that I wasn't a fan of what Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 achieve. Souls 3 does bring a lot of interesting challenges to the table, having to avoid a giant crossbow and giant worm, exploring abandoned catacombs. The variety is there, it's all pretty fun. Until I get killed in 3 hits. This is by far the most difficult Souls game I have played. It took me so long to finish the video that I started replaying Sekiro for the review of that game. And through the many hours that I've put into that game, I have not gotten my ass handed to me as easily and as often as Souls 3. I don't know what the hell happened in this game. It feels like the developers of 2 saw me bitching about the lack of difficulty in that game and made every enemy fucking kick you into the stratosphere. The enemies do such an insane amount of damage. I'm talking if an enemy catches you lacking and connects a hit, that is a third of your health bar disintegrated from this earth. And mind you, this is the game in which your health bar is long enough to cover half the fucking screen. Like, I appreciate the difficulty increase, but oh my god. I don't even think Malaria Blade of Illnesses could do that much damage in one hit. I switch stances on what I think of this every other minute. At one minute I'll say that it's hard to fix your difficulty, and the next I'll just say it is what it is and just get better. What I will say is that I believe that these are some of, if not the best bosses in the franchise. These are some of the most entertaining bosses with some of the best patterns that I've seen in the entire series. And my favorite, by far, has to be the Souls of Cinder. Spoilers, I guess? I don't know. The Souls of Cinder might just be one of the best final bosses I have ever played in a video game. Not only because of its stellar presentation and design, but also because of how it effectively connects all the themes of Dark Souls 3 together and links the game back to the very beginning with the first Dark Souls game. The Souls of Cinder are a pretty good boss by themselves, are a very difficult boss that possesses a Pandora's box worth of shit that they can throw at you. While the fight starts out with the boss fighting you with a sword, it quickly evolves into a boss that switches build. Why can't I say it? It quickly evolves into a boss that switches builds as it sees fit. It will use magic, use spears, throw poison at you, the pyromancy stance. I mean, the bastard can heal itself and it can buff itself. I'm struggling over here! What makes this boss so good, however, is the story. What makes this boss so good, however, is the story reason behind its existence. I feel like that didn't sound well. What makes this boss so good, however, is the story reason behind its. Fuck it. La razón por la cual este jefe es tan bueno, sin embargo, es la razón relacionada con la historia por la cual el jefe existe en el primer lugar. Las almas de las cenizas son una manifestación de todos los que han sido conectados con la primera llama, lo que significa que de una manera bastante rara, estoy peleando contra mí mismo. Oh my god, I'm my biggest enemy! The many different builds that many players have used throughout their journeys through the Dark Souls series are all encapsulated in this one boss, one last stand before the end of this world, and once you defeat all those souls linked with the first flame, only one will remain, the one to first link the first flame. Brother, I was giddy when I first reached this phase for the first time. I didn't know about this part of the final boss, but experiencing this boss with my experience with the other 2 Souls games under my belt made this part of the game feel extremely satisfying. A final fight with the man that began this entire cycle. A final fight with Gwyn, the Lord of Cinder. The Souls of Cinder are easily the best fight in the series thematically, and the second phase makes it one of my favorite boss fights in any video game, and a perfect finale for the Dark Souls series. Dark Souls 3 is an extremely good finale to the Dark Souls series, connecting all the games together and ending this world in a more than fitting way. The game has its flaws, but after finishing the game, I can still say that this is the best Dark Souls game, and an incredible journey in general. Well, that's all the time that I've had for today. I'm just a random stranger that you met on the internet, but hey, just call me Pseudo.